I often wonder where we would be today if the auto industry back in the 70s had followed the progress and development we saw in the computer industry 2 decades later. We wouldn't be driving around in EVs with a 300-mile range, I am certain. I'm Dave. Welcome to Dave Takes It On. Here is the latest news from around the world. Well, the UK recently backtracked on the new ICE car sales ban that was scheduled to begin in 2030 under pressure from the auto industry. And now the Joe Biden administration has just rolled back on the ICE exhaust emission targets they set for the USA by 2030 as well, for exactly the same reason. All their legacy factories have lobbied them, stating they can't hope to meet them. Really? 2030? That's 6 years. Well, I look back, I became a new car sales manager way back in the late 70s, and the talk back then was of the car that could do well over 100 miles per gallon. I even had a go at it, and trying to raise money for a charity by driving a Citroën 2CV on an old World War II airfield at Prydanig in Cornwall, trying to get that 100 miles per gallon. Well, we failed, but we got somewhere in the 80s, I seem to recall. Well, that was a good old days. Back then I could actually buy 3 gallons, it's about 13 litres, of petrol for my Mini Countryman for £1, and it cost £2 to fill my tank. My Mini back then could achieve 30 miles per gallon on a good run, and the average for most cars was around 25 miles per gallon, something like a Ford Cortina. Diesel back then was very rare. Today, according to the majority of sources, the average mile per gallon for a petrol car is 36, and a diesel just 40. Where did it all go wrong? The very best we have available today struggles to reach much over 50 miles per gallon, even driven very carefully on a long run. Well, Ford admit failure with previous business strategy, and they begin to discount their overpriced EV models, the Mustang Mach-E and the F-150 Lightning. Yeah, they only have 2, which have been piling up in dealers right across the country. How is a dealer going to make an attractive offer of a 2023 Mustang Mach-E that has sat for almost a year in the dealer's yard, open to the elements, not being used, not being driven, not being charged, and not really being looked after at all, and now decidedly last year's model? How much discount are they going to have to offer? Particularly now, because they're just switching their focus. They're just beginning to target the budget end of the EV market, sub $25,000. But hang on, isn't that how they made their success and money over 100 years earlier? Well, it's taken long enough, but they weren't alone in getting it totally wrong. None of the legacy auto come out covered in glory. But Ford's 2023 EV sales results are a serious worry, or at least they should be. 72,000 EVs claim to be sold, but are they? Because tens of thousands of them are still sitting in their dealers. They're not sold to the public, they're sold to themselves. So when is a sale not a sale? Well, VW has just changed. They've announced they're joining the big boys, and they will begin direct to the public sales in 2026. At least they will no longer be able to hide what is actually sold to a member of the public among the unsold cars sold to their dealers. But Ford's 72,000 EVs sold in a whole year is pitiful against Tesla's or BYD's monthly sales, all of them direct to the public. Each sold about twice that number in a single month. Talk about a different league. It's like comparing Manchester United with, I don't know, Dagenham over 50s amateur football club. Well, despite total turmoil in the ICE and EV world and high interest rates and inflation, Tesla plows ahead regardless. But Tesla has done nothing unusual in a business sense. All businesses strive to get to mass production where the cost of production plummets and you begin to make really serious profits. Tesla just did it in an accelerated manner which almost bankrupted them back as recently as 2017. Now, Xiaomi, a Chinese manufacturer, has just stated that Tesla has a unique advantage over everybody else in having a much lower than average COP, cost of production, and is able to drop prices quite dramatically, if necessary, and still make a really good profit. The legacy auto could have done the same, and they are slowly beginning to realise that if they had taken EVs seriously, then today Tesla would not even exist. Their existing but out-of-date business model, which today focuses exclusively on top-of-the-range luxury models, loaded up with all the goodies you can imagine, and making a fairly decent profit margin, well, it's almost stopped working. It seems they may have priced themselves out of the market. They all need to change right now, or they will be slaughtered by the likes of Tesla and numerous Chinese startups. It's not too late, but it is far later than you think. General Motors, meanwhile, enters production hell. They targeted between 200 and 300,000 Ultium-powered EV models to be sold in 2023, and they achieved just 14,000. That was out of a total EV sales, an equally dismal 75,000. Oh. Design and targets are easy. Production is hell. Now, hang on. Where have I heard that before? Well, the Detroit Fire Department reveals it has been called out to General Motors 9 times in the last 6 months. Last time was when a forklift truck punctured a container filled with highly flammable battery materials. And when they solve the manufacturing issues, or should I say if they solve them, they still have a major headache with their software. It is not up to scratch. How many of you said Legacy Auto will just switch production to EVs when they're ready and they'll wipe out all the competition? I think the reverse is true. Nearly all of the legacy have almost already been wiped out themselves. Well, Ferrari, despite never having made a single EV so far, they're claiming, yeah, they're about ready and they will. And it'll sound just like the ICE version. What, you mean a V8 or a V12? Well, that I must hear. Well, listen to the Porsche sound effects recently. They are making EVs very successfully with their Taycan and with their new Macan, and it really does sound good. Here's a quick sample of it for you. But the trouble is, it sounds really good for the few seconds when you want to impress someone. It's not for you. For day-to-day use or a long road trip, a roaring engine sound constantly droning away is the last thing you want, drowning out your multi-thousand-pound 16-speaker twin subwoofer, Bose or Bang & Olufsen hi-fi system. Oh, hang on, maybe the sound cancelling system built into those hi-fis will filter out the artificial engine sound. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Gimmick? Almost certainly. Well, robots are beginning to be trained up in the Gigafactories. Now, I know most people are bored with this. They don't think anything at all about it. Most people ridicule it. But they say it's no big deal. It is, in fact, a very big deal, a massive deal, a transformational deal, paradigm shift in manufacturing. See, no matter what people say about the price of batteries, wages are the single largest cost for building cars. And that applies also to ICE cars. A single, highly trained and skilled auto worker can earn well over 50,000 yen direct wages, plus the employer has to pay another 25,000 in costs, taxes and facilities. So you look at a minimum about £75,000 per year per worker. Plus you then need to lay on facilities. You've got to heat and light the factory, provide toilets, canteen, coffee, give them rest periods, give them breaks, let them have a lunch break. And you still only get 8 hours a day, probably nearer 7 hours by the time they stand around the coffee machine talking, and they only work 5 days a week, and they only work 48 weeks of the year. They do want their holidays. So you get about 2,000 hours of work out of each skilled auto worker per year. But there are 8,000 hours and more in a year, so if you operate round the clock, 24/365, you're going to need at least 4 humans to cover one job. £300,000 a year in wages. Yet a single robot like the Tesla Optimus robot, and that's projected to cost no more than £50,000, you can get 23 hours a day, that's just taking off an hour for charging, and they work for 365 days a year. You'll get 8,000 hours of work out of them, and tasks and production. So £50,000 for 8 hours gives a direct payback of just 6 years. But you don't have to pay a robot. You will save £300,000 a year in wages that you used to pay. That's enough saving in the first year alone to go and buy an extra 5 robots. Well, in plain English, buy a single robot and it'll be more efficient and more reliable and pay for itself in considerably less than 2 months, and it will then continue to work for up to 23 hours a day for multiple years, only stopping to charge as required. In fact, it should be possible to provide extension leads and then assign a robot with a flat battery to go and do a stationary task for an hour or so, maybe packing batteries into a battery pack, in which case you could actually get 24 hours a day work out of them. This is a phenomenal no-brainer and will dramatically speed up and further drop the cost of production of Tesla EVs by several orders of magnitude. And this is at a time when others have not yet even reached mass production. Now do you see why Tesla, China, and even legacy automakers like Mercedes are introducing robots into their factories? I know they've had robot machines for a while, but I'm talking about humanoid robots, because a machine that's bolted to the floor cannot do what a human does. A robot with legs and arms and a head can. But if you can make your own, like Tesla does, then you get a real, it's not a double, it's not even a triple, it's a quintuple whammy. First whammy, they will be much cheaper to manufacture yourself than going out and buying them in from someone else who wants to make a profit. Second, you can design them to perform specific tasks, and they will perform those much more efficiently if they are tailor-made for them, rather than having to bodge or adapt an off-the-shelf robot to their existing roles. Third, you can sell some of them to make bigger profits or fund expansion. Now, the fourth ironic whammy is that the cost of making robots will dramatically speed up, and the COP will plummet once they reach mass production themselves. But finally, definitely not the least, the robots that you've just made can and will make robots. So that $50,000 price per robot will quickly become a cost to people like Tesla of well under £10,000 a robot. You still think they're trivial? Hope you don't work in the motor industry. Well, Ford loses ground with sales of their F-150 pickup truck, petrol version, not the ICE, not the EV. For 46 years, it has been the best-selling truck in the US and one of the best-selling vehicles in the world. But sales are dropping quite steadily and significantly, and it was recently overtaken by Toyota with the RAV4 and the Corolla. Now Tesla beats them all with the Model Y. Let me put something to bed. All talk about a refresh Model Y should be shelved. Why on earth stop production of the best-selling car in the world when they're selling all they can make? And it makes no sense. No, the refresh will not happen this year, that's my prediction. But the Model 3 refresh, the Highland, has just been launched to massive praise from the motoring press. It's a brand new car, they say. Now, sales of the Model 3 had dropped dramatically last year, but that was expected. It was mostly the Osborne effect. And this is where people stop buying the old model once they hear a new one, which is bigger, better, faster, is about to be released and may not be any dearer. Well, now it is here. I'm fascinated to see how much demand there actually is for it. I predict it will be huge. By the way, the rumours that the sub 25,000 Model 2, now being confirmed as the Redwood, being launched later this year, it's unlikely to be before 2025. Maybe not even then. So as long as all the Gigafactories are running flat out and they're making huge profit, producing cars and selling everything they make, why on earth would they stop to launch a new model? When a new factory opens, has spare capacity and begins to ramp up, or when demand peaks and they stop selling as many cars, then they'll launch. In the UK, I expect there'll be some sort of launch this year, but don't expect to be able to buy one in the UK much before the beginning of 2026. Sorry. Will Panasonic sign a battery agreement with Subaru? That's a name you don't hear too much about these days. It's Japanese, but it is quite a bit smaller than Nissan, and they seem to have gone off the boil in recent years. Their only entry into the EV world is the Solterra, and I saw one of them recently in Exeter Services. Looked very nice. It's a bit of a late entrant. It's rather pricey for a first effort. I think it's about starting price about 56,000, and they only sold about 8,000 last year. But this looks like they have bigger plans, and batteries are the key to mass production. Get your supply sorted and you can grow. But a word of warning. Tesla has 5 major suppliers of batteries. They make their own. They also buy from BYD, Panasonic, LG and CATL. If any one lets them down, they've got plenty of other choice. Tying yourself to one supplier may not work well in your favour. It certainly didn't work when GM tied themselves to LG. Well, BMW announced a new SUV, but it's a concept car. And nobody knows if it actually will launch, ever. But if it does, they're saying it's going to be on the 800-volt platform. And that'll give blisteringly fast charging speeds. They claim 186 miles in 10 minutes. And I personally believe that if this ever happens, this will be about the peak of charging speeds. See, if a petrol car takes 5 minutes, but you then need to go into the kiosk or shop to pay, it's actually nearer 10 minutes by the time you get in your car and drive off. Now, if you have an EV and you plug in and you use an auto-charge type system like Tesla's or Fastned, where you don't use an app, you don't use contactless, you don't do anything, you just plug your car in, the charger recognises your car and it takes payment directly without you having to do anything. And that could actually be better than petrol because you don't have to stand there for that 5 minutes holding the petrol nozzle, breathing in the fumes in the cold and the rain. Yeah, they have canopies, but you still get wet and cold. But it is the autonomous features they're pushing very strongly. It's scheduled to enter production in 2025, but unlikely to reach sensible numbers before 2026. And by then, autonomous will be looking very different. Unless it's an instant hit straight from the launch, it will struggle in what will be by then a very competitive market. Even they recognise that, I think, because to hedge their bets, they're already expanding production in China, where it's cheaper, and they'll be opening their Mexico factory in early 2027, if all goes well and they don't put that one on hold. But a big standout for me is that they've shrunk their huge kidney design at the front to a much more sane and sensible size, and an LED will illuminate it, making it a pleasant feature. Whoever thought those huge kidney shapes would appeal to their EV buyers? Is he or she still in their job? See, EVs have no need for front grills. All the cooling they need happens almost invisibly underneath the car. But I suspect that the real reason for it is that this body for the iX is not an EV designed body. They may claim the platform is, but the body isn't. It's just the one they use in their X range of petrol cars. And that does have a huge radiator at the front, and that does need a massive grille. Well, stuck with that body shell and an obscene sized frontal area, somebody somewhere had to do something with it. But why so large in the first place? They never used to be. Some of the BMWs are really quite sleek. And others today, like the Porsche Taycan, they're nothing like this. They don't have that brick wall at the front. Is there anyone out there that thinks this is an attractive feature? Let me know in the comments down below. Well, Stellantis continue to totally baffle me. First, they have a hugely successful car, the Fiat 500, petrol, best-selling and all that. Then they go and launch their EV version at almost twice the price of the petrol one. And it doesn't sell. They're now laying off staff that they took on for the EV factory making these due to lack of sales. Spoiler alert, the Fiat 500 is a great little car and it sells well because it has a great little price. In the UK, it's about 15,000. So, tell me, what is likely to happen if you launch an identical EV version of it for nearly 30,000? Yeah, I know they have a base model only 25,000, but it's got a tiny battery. The main one is about 29,000. Well, whatever you did expect, it didn't sell in any numbers, so instead of dropping the price, they've just announced they're going to launch a petrol-engined hybrid version of the Fiat 500e. I'll tell you what, I bet it won't be selling at £15,000 either. Does anyone there actually know what they're doing? See, their actions seem to suggest that Stellantis is just a group of fiercely independent, wildly different companies operating under the banner of Stellantis, but all doing their own thing and floundering badly. Business strategy needs to be big and bold, but also in the realms of the real world. See, Aston Martin tried exactly this. It was more a compliance thing. Their sports cars could not compete with modern regulations for efficiency and miles per gallon, so Aston Martin just bought in a tiny hatchback. They called it the Cygnet. In actual fact, it was a Toyota. It was a car that was readily available, just not in the UK. It was the Toyota IQ. They rebadged it on the outside, Aston Martin, and they hand-sewed some logos into the seats and steering wheel, and then they claimed that they have a model range that goes from 60 miles per gallon, right the way down to 10 miles per gallon. Averaged out, we're doing about 30 miles per gallon. Well, the regulators saw right through that one. And these were offered at about £40,000 or £50,000. I don't believe they actually sold any, because who in their right mind would? It wasn't an Aston Martin, just had a badge on it. Well, good try, but even the name is brilliant. I like that. See, Aston Martin doors open slightly differently from others. They don't just open outwards, they swing upwards slightly to make it getting out a bit easier. A number of people gave it the nickname the Swans as they open the wings. So the baby car was obviously a Cygnet. I like that. Shame it never sold. Good try. Well, it wasn't a good try. You were trying to con someone. Well, it turns out the EU is not that different from Stellantis. Does anyone there know what they're doing? Seems not. Ursula von der Leyen is working up a sweat trying to get the Chinese EVs barred from any grants or subsidies in Europe. In fact, she wants them to pay a really high tariff, and they want to backdate that as well. The reason? The Chinese subsidise their EVs so they can sell them cheaper abroad, threatening the native EV industries. But hold on. Does not the French government own part of Renault? Put money into it? Do not member states offer grants and subsidies? Of course they do. And now the European auto industry is asking for additional subsidies and grants to boost a flagging industry, despite sales being up 10% so far this year. That includes a growth in BEVs as well. Well, America, meanwhile, gets in a right tizzy. Nvidia, then what make the great graphics cards for computers, and to have a joint deal with Tesla for the displays, they're exploring a venture with BYD. Well, BYD is a Chinese-owned and run company, and the US is not so hot on China at the moment. EVs and computers need graphic cards or chips, and need more and more powerful ones, as EVs and computers offer more and more features and connectivity. Nvidia graphics cards are in over half of all computers around the world, so what happens if and when this deal goes ahead? Are half of all the computers in the world suddenly at risk of being hacked by the Chinese government? Will the US have to ban all computers that have Nvidia components, not just graphics cards? What about Tesla, who use Nvidia chips? American company? It's a real mess, and we live in a totally diverse world where materials, components, and whole products can be manufactured anywhere and you have no idea where. That's the tablet you've just bought from Samsung, the Korean company, and one of the good guys. They're on everyone's good list. Probably has materials sourced from China, maybe the lithium, and from the DRC, maybe the cobalt, and they're involved in child slavery. But you don't know that when you buy a Samsung tablet. Or that nice new jacket you bought in Marks and Spencer's. It could have cotton in it that was grown in China or Russia or somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa using slave labour, or India. Where on earth do you draw the line? Well, the world seems to have gone off lithium in favour of sodium-ion batteries. They're not quite as powerful, they have a lower power density. It means a battery of a set size and weight will produce and store less energy than an equivalent, same size and weight, lithium-ion battery. So where does that leave Tesla, who has just begun constructing a lithium mine and processing plant in Texas? Have they missed the boat? Have they got it wrong? No. Sodium batteries are only just on the market and they're being used in very limited numbers, just 2 models I'm aware of at the moment, and they're baby Chinese EV models. It's only used in smaller, cheaper cars that will probably never reach the West with its higher safety standards. At the moment it has about half the energy density as lithium, so is ideal for tiny little cars that China makes. The sodium batteries will never be expected to propel one of those from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds or to a top speed of 145 miles an hour. Perish the thought. But they are cheap, and the fact that they don't need that acceleration or speed makes sodium ideal for budget small hatchbacks around the world. Nobody buys a Citroën C1 and expects to out-accelerate a Ferrari at the traffic lights. I believe Tesla's safe for a number of years as sodium begins slowly to take over at the tiny end of the market, but it will eventually get better. The energy density will increase and one day might equal lithium or even exceed it. Just the way that LFP batteries, when they were first launched, did have a lower power density, and now they've always almost matched the power of lithium NMC batteries. But here again is Tesla's secret strength. They claim to have discovered a totally new method for extracting and processing lithium in a much more environmentally friendly manner at scale that makes it more efficient and cheaper. So, if sodium batteries have risen in price as the power density increases, Tesla could launch onto the world in a few years really cheap and abundant lithium, and it's made in the USA, so it would automatically qualify for the very generous IRA, Inflation Reduction Act subsidies on offer there, and there are virtually no shipping costs. How much does it cost to ship a ton of lithium carbonate from China to the USA? Tesla might just have pulled off a real flanker here. Time will tell. And finally, the battle between the oil giants is really heating up, fighting over their share of the rapidly expanding and profitable EV charging movement. The major accountancy firms are now predicting profits of around 12%, and that is looking attractive to them. The International Energy Authority reports that demand for petrol and diesel peaked many years ago. It's falling steadily, and the outlook is for that to accelerate. The drop is going to get faster. So, not being able to drag it out any longer, and with costs rising and profits falling, they're now taking EV charging seriously. Or so they say. They don't want to be here, but they are here. Petrol stations have been closing down for many years. How many of them in your area are now being used as car washes? We've got loads of them around here. But this is likely to accelerate into the future. Shell has announced a number of petrol forecourt closures. Others will follow. I'm in the process of completing my research into the oil giants, and this will be a separate video to be released later this month. Just be aware they are being forced into this, and if government policy reverses or U-turns, they could also follow suit. They sniff out the profits and they follow them regardless. If they can see a better or quicker route, they'll be there like a shot. Well, thanks very much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, please click the like button. And if you would, please subscribe. It makes such a difference to us as a new channel. If you click the bell icon, the notification, you'll be notified the next time we launch a video. And a massive, massive, massive thank you, last but not least, to our Patreon members. This side of the business is growing dramatically. We've had our most successful month ever. And thank you so much for your support for the channel. I'm Dave.